Let's talk about why dieting is like this redneck slingshot here. You've probably seen this video at some point. As you can see, this girl gets strapped into these giant bungee cords, driven back about 40 yards, then lets go, violently swinging back and forth. And oddly enough, dieting has a very similar effect on your metabolism. So let's jump over the whiteboard real quick, and I want to show you a quick illustration as to why that actually is the case. Okay, so here's our illustration. This bar here is showing us how many calories that you would normally take in on any given day. So let's say for the last 6 months to a year, you've weighed the same amount every time you step on a scale. That's typically going to be because you've been taking in a pretty standard amount of calories every single day. Let's say it's 2,500 calories that you've taken in every day, and that's gotten you to the weight that you're currently at. But you want to lose some weight, so you know you need to cut back on some calories, right? So we have to create a caloric deficit, and our new diet total, the new amount we're going to take in, is something less than what we previously had. Now, the reason we get the slingshot effect, where you've dieted, you've initially lost some weight, but then it slowed down, eventually stopped, and then went the other direction, and a lot of times goes past where you started. So you started at 150 pounds and you made it down to 135 pounds, but it just got to be too much. You couldn't take it anymore. You were cheating all the time. Cravings were out of control, and you just said, all right, screw it, and you started going back the other direction. But even though you went back to this normal amount, you actually ended up gaining more weight than you started with. So you started at 150, went down to 135, but now you're at 155. And then you've done that again, and maybe you made it down to 140, but now you're up to 160. And you get this slingshot effect of going down, slowing, turning around, and going back the other direction. Now there's a reason why this happens, and it's actually your biology working against you. When we go into a caloric deficit, especially an extreme caloric deficit, which unfortunately a lot of times people end up doing when they start a new diet because they want to lose the weight fast, you go into such a deficit that your body has a couple of defense mechanisms. The two main ones that it has that are working against you. The first one is that your metabolism actually begins to slow down. Right? It doesn't like this deficit. It doesn't like the difference that you've now created, and it wants to minimize this as much as possible. So what it does is it actually slows down the amount of calories that it burns with the other food that you give it, attempting to decrease that deficit. The second thing that it does is it actually makes your body, or your body actually starts to secrete hormones that tell you that you're hungry, even if you're not. And even if you don't actually, you don't need the food because you know what you're doing with this deficit. You're trying to lose some body fat. Your body doesn't know this, right? Your body doesn't care that you're trying to lose fat. All it knows is that it's not getting what it's used to getting, and so it's going to fight against you. And so you got two forces really working against you big time, because your body's going to slow down its metabolic rate, which means it's going to burn fewer calories than it was previously. And it's also going to make you more hungry, so that you'll eat more food to hopefully make up this difference. And the problem is that gets very hard to say no to after a while. In fact, it's pretty much impossible up to a certain point, which is typically why most people give in on some diet after a few weeks and then start going back the other direction. Right? So the problem is when you try to force your body to do something, it reacts in that equal and opposite direction. It's Newton's third law of motion, but it actually applies physiologically to when we're trying to diet, trying to lose weight, and trying to change our body composition. So when you go really hard this way, it wants to go really hard the other way, and that's where we get this back and forth slingshot motion. Right? So here's the trick. Right? You can't force your body into doing this. You can for a short period of time, and you see the rapid weight loss for a couple weeks, but then you go back and you're worse than you started. You have to coax your body. You have to gently get it to go the direction that you want to, and that's the more gently you can make that happen, the smoother and the slower that it happens, the less resistance that you're going to get from your physiological response mechanisms. So while a lot of times people think that when we're trying to help people lose weight with our particular plans, it may not be super fast. It may not be, man, I lost just ungodly amounts of weight in a very short period of time. The reason we don't want to do that is because we're trying to avoid this. We're trying to make it sustainable. We're trying to allow you to get to a point where you've reached your weight loss goal and you can stay there because you're not fighting against some really strong physiological forces to go back the other direction. The other reason that we don't want to get so severe with our caloric deficit is that when those hormones come into play, the ones that slow down your metabolism and cause you to want to eat more, once those show up in your system, the really cruel thing is let's say you go ahead and give in. You're like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go back to my normal amount of caloric intake, and I'm just going to go back to my starting weight. Well, the problem is your body didn't like it when this happened, when it happened too severely. And what it does is it says, hey, that's great. Glad we got back to where we started, but what if that happens again? That's not good. Well, let's go ahead and push a little bit further past it. So you can get these things started with too much of a caloric deficit and eventually go back to your normal caloric intake, the problem is that those hormones are still in your system and they're going to stay in your system for a while. So your metabolism is continued to slow down, right? And your hunger has continued to go up. So if we go back to our normal caloric intake, we take in this whole amount where we used to be able to stay at a certain weight, let's say again 150 pounds. But now our metabolism has slowed down. What's going to happen? I'm taking in the same amount of calories, but I'm less efficient at using them, or I'm more efficient at using them, and so I'll actually gain weight going back to my normal caloric intake. Not to mention I'm also still fighting the temptation to eat even more. So it's very important that we don't make this deficit so big and go so fast in an attempt to lose weight too quickly, because we end up setting ourselves up for failure long term. And there's a couple of studies that we'll do some other videos on later that get really fascinating into how long it doesn't take much dieting to end up having some really long-term implications in terms of not being able to drop weight. So we recommend that we keep this deficit at a moderate level, lose 1 to 2 pounds a week, and do it in a way that's sustainable so that we can continue to just steadily march forward, losing weight without causing a lot of these physiological response mechanisms that get us into that weight loss slingshot. So if you know how to do this and you know how to set everything up on your own, fantastic. If you don't, there's a link below, probably just popped up on the screen here and also in the description, where we'll actually walk you through the exact numbers that you need based on where you are and customize this process for you so that you're able to make sure that you're in a deficit so that you're losing weight and burning that body fat, but not so much of a deficit that you do the typical yo-yo or slingshot that you've probably been used to. So go ahead and click the link below. Happy to help you out and hope that this made sense and was pretty useful for you.